And now it's an honor to introduce the Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne's Launch Vehicle and Hypersonic Systems Vice President, Steve Boulay.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you all. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and just offer a few thoughts and remarks. This is actually my first time at the conference, but I'm no stranger in any way to the InThinking philosophy, and actually have been a very strong advocate of bringing these capabilities, opening people's minds to them, and bringing them to our business to realize the benefits. And I'm going to talk about that in a certain context here in just a moment. But on behalf of the Leadership Committee, we are very proud to be now an 11-year partnership with the InThinking Forum, and our sincere thanks go to the 2012 Forum organizers for, again, allowing us to participate. I'd like to thank our fellow employees, the team members that put this all together, you all as attendees, because the conference wouldn't exist if you weren't here and making yourselves part of it. The presenters, pleasure to have you here this morning, and also the folks from our facilities and security organization that help keep this thing in order. And I think you all got a shot to see our Learning and Leadership Center yesterday, and I hope you enjoyed that, because we've got a tremendous amount of our history locked up in that building. We're also very proud that our partnership actively supports individuals in our communities, and that is enriching. You've just heard some of the things about how we're trying to inspire minds, and I know we're going to hear more about that as we go forward. I do want to add some thoughts here. I spent the entire week last week in Colorado Springs at the National Space Symposium. I see the general knocking his head up and down there. He's very, very, very familiar with it. And no offense to you, General Trainor, I sat with an awful lot of blue suit individuals who had many stars on their shoulders, and inclusive of General Shelton, the head of Air Force Space Command, General Hyten, who is transitioning from the Air Force Acquisition in the Pentagon. Now Lieutenant General Select Hyten will be the Vice Commander at Space Command. And General Lieutenant General Polakowski, who is the head of the Space and Missile Center here in El Segundo at the LA Air Force Base. And I don't say that just to throw a lot of names around, but they are our customers. They are the people that we, PWR, spend every day of our lives pretty much figuring out how to provide mission success for. And they have two very significant priorities right now. Mission success, which is getting the spacecraft to orbit, and it is clearly the top priority. It is what we need to keep the warfighters on the ground safe. General Polakowski made some comments about if we don't show up with the capabilities that we put on orbit as a result of producing our products and launching these spacecraft, there are young men and women that don't necessarily come home. And I think that puts it all in perspective for us. And so for those of you that are PWR employees, don't lose sight of that. What we do is extremely important. But relevant to what you're doing here today is their second priority. They are setting very, very clear expectations around the affordability of our products. And affordability comes with good systems thinking, with our ability to engineer both the product and the processes, understanding our costs, managing our costs, and doing it with the kind of thinking process that comes out of the very topics that you'll be discussing, have been discussing. I guess today's the third day of the conference. And so I ask you to keep that in perspective as well, because although it's not the number one priority, because delivery of the capability is the number one priority, at one time it was mission assurance despite the cost. It is now mission assurance with cognizance of the cost. And so I'll leave you with those thoughts. Again, I thank you for having the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you this morning. I commend you for participating and committing yourself to this activity, and I know you'll come away with some great experiences, and I think the theme is the potential for leading with better questions. So Once again, thank you very much and enjoy the conference.
And now I'd like to introduce another colleague of mine. He's a system engineer at Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne. He's currently the vice president of the Black Employee Association at PWR, and also is an indoors ambassador to PWR, where they help talented minority college students to obtain internships with PWR. Cameron Purvis.
I'd like to thank Camila for that wonderful introduction. So it's a privilege to stand up, have the opportunity to introduce Brigadier General Timothy E. Trainor. And I do want to give a little piece of your background. I know you're ready to go. He is currently the Dean of the Academic Board of the United States Military Academy at West Point. And as a young systems engineer myself, I needed to state this point. I would like to talk to you after the conference. But his former position was Professor Dean of the Systems Engineering Department at West Point. So without further ado, please welcome him with a warm applause.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. I think we've got this on now. Great. Appreciate it. If I can figure out all this technology. It's wonderful to be here with you today. I need to get my things set there. All right. First of all, yes, I was the head of the Department of Systems Engineering before this job, and it's really scary thought now, because now I'm the dean at the academy, and I have, as an engineer, I now have 13 different academic departments I have oversight over, and so I've got oversight over folks like English and philosophy. And they're wonderful, history and folks like that. It's absolutely wonderful to do that, but it's kind of a scary thought that an engineer is providing oversight to those organizations. This is a picture of West Point here, and I'm obviously very proud of West Point. This is on parade that you see up here, and I want you to take a look at those uniforms and just create a mental image of them, because I'm going to come back to that later on. But that's on our plane at West Point with beautiful Washington Hall behind it, and then up on the top of the hill is our cadet chapel. It's great to be here with you in Los Angeles, and I want to come back to something that Steve said. Steve, I know you were with all those wonderful Air Force generals, and we are a very joint organization. In fact, my executive officer right now is an Air Force captain. But I do want to put in a plug and remind you that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff now, Marty Dempsey, is a Army general, a West Point grad, class of '74, and also was a former faculty member, taught in the Department of English and Philosophy years ago at West Point. So, yeah. You know, I've been very fortunate to graduate from West Point just a few years ago and serve about 29 years now in the Army. The Army has enabled me to earn an MBA from the Fuqua School of Business at Duke and a PhD in Industrial Engineering from North Carolina State. My wife went to UNC Chapel Hill for her PhD in social psychology, so we really have the research triangle area covered there in North Carolina. Unfortunately, basketball season during our house is very interesting. And unfortunately, she corrupted all our kids to be Tar Heel fans instead of Blue Devil fans. I do have to put this up here. You know, I'm in the Army, so I got to follow rules. And we have lots of lawyers. And I know you've... any lawyers out there? God bless you all. But I have to tell you up front that what I'm going to talk to you about are my own thoughts and not necessarily those of the U.S. government. I got to tell you, I have the best job in the Army. Bar none. I really think I have the best job in the Army as the dean at West Point. In addition to running the education program at a top-tier college in the country, I get to have fun with our students who we call cadets. What these images show up here on the left side is me on what we call the Slide for Life, one of the required things cadets have to do in a water confidence course, and then going around clockwise up on the top there. After you do that, you climb up a ladder, get on an I-beam, and you walk across it 50 feet or so, and then you get on that rope and you skinny across that rope and then drop down into the water. But anyway, I'm up on this 2 summers ago. I'm on that I-beam walking across. I get about halfway across, and the cadets all on the ground started calling for me to do what's called a rocket cheer. One of our cheers there we do at the academy called the rocket, and it requires a lot of gyrations and everything. And I'm on this little I-beam, walking across this thing. So I hadn't done one in years. So I turned, faced on the beam, faced the cadets on the shore, and went through the cheer with them. Thought I did all right. Went off, continued the obstacle, got on the water, and headed off. Well, technology as it is, it was caught on tape. They caught it on tape, and it went viral. It went viral, and my wife saw it. She saw it. I get home that night, and my wife is still an active duty officer. She's a colonel, and she runs our psychology program at West Point. She looked at it, just looks me in the eye and says, "Look, that's at best a C- effort, Dean. The dean needs to give us an A effort." So I went and spent time with our cheerleaders down in that lower picture, and so now I'm fully fledged certified on this cheer, and have a lot of fun with cadets on the sideline. Speaking of that, I'll talk about my house for a minute. As I said, I'm an engineer, and my wife is a social psychologist, so we have this, engineer versus psych thing going on, and she has tries to mold my mind. And I wanted to share with you what her perspective is on engineers. So first of all, when I go to a conference, an engineer conference, I come back from it and say, "Hey, it was a really good time. I learned a lot of good things." She said, "Oh, really? What do you do at engineering conferences for fun? What do you compare pocket protectors with each other?" So I'm like, "Okay, all right. Well, at least we build things." Anyway, here it is. But I do want to share with you. You may be familiar with this little audio clip, but this is her view on engineers.
I'm afraid your son has the knack.
A knack?
The knack. It's a rare condition characterized by an extreme intuition about all things mechanical and electrical, and utter social ineptitude.
Can he lead a normal life?
No. Not you.
Sorry about that for all my fellow engineers out there. I'm going to come back to that later on in this. I really like our conference theme of leading with better questions. Now, I hypothesize that displaying both good leadership skills and an ability to ask better questions are learned traits, and that is, people are not just born with these traits. They learn through formal education, through application, and through experience. I'm going to start by talking about the military and briefly about how it has evolved, hoping to show you that it is an organization that thinks and innovates over time. I also plan to talk about the concept of systems thinking to a degree. I know you all are well versed in that. And a framework that we use up at the academy, many of our cadets get exposed to, called the systems decision process, which we teach out of the systems engineering department. I started with the thought that the ability to ask better questions in order to lead is a learned trait. So I plan to talk about how we educate future Army leaders at the undergraduate level at West Point. I believe our approach in education provides our graduates an ability to put complex issues into perspective and to understand the contextual lenses with which to view them. So warfare has evolved over the centuries. Armies like the Greeks and the Roman often fought in tightly controlled formations like the phalanx, in part because it was difficult to communicate over any distance, and leaders could control the movements and actions of the large groups of fighters. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century and World War II. Technology had evolved. We have planes, airplanes and large ships for transports, radios over which to communicate, and vehicles to carry weapons, ammunition, and supplies over long distances. Now, this graphic only partially displays the enormous complexity of the invasion of France in 1944 by the Allied forces at Normandy, with planes carrying thousands of paratroopers, large ships, each with tens of landing craft and hundreds of soldiers, all synchronized to land in a relatively concentrated area at precise times to surprise and overwhelm the German defenders, in order to gain a foothold on the European continent, from which to pour thousands more soldiers into France and lead to the eventual defeat of the Axis powers. Today in Afghanistan, we don't have those large formations of soldiers and Marines fighting huge battles with the enemy. Rather, we operate in small units from mountaintops and villages, moving about the difficult terrain in the country in helicopters. Technology now provides a global reach for communications and intelligence collection and dissemination, along with our ability to quickly reinforce units in action from planes and helicopters, which enables the military to move in these small formations. But how does this adaptation and innovation over time happen in an organization like the military that is often presumed to be rigid and inflexible? The chart on the left shows an old organizational hierarchy, which appears quite rigid, doesn't it? We all have those kind of diagrams. Now, coming back to that picture I talked about at the beginning, that bottom right, anyone want to guess what era that's taken from? That's a picture of West Point before parade. Anybody got an idea what time frame that was? It was the 1950s. So go back to your image from the uniforms first. They haven't changed. And I will tell you, go back to 1880. And 1880, the uniforms, the dress uniforms were still the same. The reality is the military has led change by adapting technology and innovating practices and organizations to meet the demands and challenges presented by determined foes. Often this was the result of a national call to arms, so to speak, like during World War II, and the military and the government had the resources to respond. The Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the first nuclear weapon, came about in World War II in reaction to concerns that the Axis powers were developing a similar capability. This led to the development of nuclear power, which is used in many parts of the world to fill our energy needs. Anybody recognize those images or what I'm trying to represent with those images? Any thoughts? Oh, except for the bongo, you know. I didn't think you would laugh about those pictures. If I could find my thing. Well, what I'm trying to represent, here, come on, there it is. And it goes away. What I'm trying to represent is the internet. You know, the origins of the, I know some politicians have taken credit for inventing the internet. However, its origins go back to 1973 and a U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, initiated research program to investigate techniques and technologies for interlinking packet networks of various kinds. DARPA wanted to develop communication protocols that would allow network computers to communicate. Too many C's in there. This was called the Interneting Project, and the system of networks which emerged from the research was known as the Internet. And thus, the invention that has literally changed our lives today was born. Okay, who has a GPS or a Garmin or similar device in their car? All right, yeah. Before these were ubiquitous, I would never stop to ask directions. And my wife would let me know about it when we got temporarily misoriented. Never lost. I remember the first time using a GPS device in the military was when I was out in the field at a beautiful place, desert at Fort Irwin, California, in the mid-1990s. I had a young lieutenant in the vehicle who absolutely loved this thing, and he's playing around. Of course, it was pretty big back then. It was pretty big, one of these nice little things you plug into your cigarette lighter. He was very excited about it, and I was just perfectly happy looking at my map and looking at the terrain. I mean, I couldn't figure out why he was so excited. You know, the desert at Fort Irwin has some very distinguishable landmarks from which to benchmark and figure out where you are. Little did I know then that this technology this lieutenant was playing with would change not only our military operations and command and control, but also our daily lives. The responsibility for the day-to-day management of the GPS program and operation of the system continues to rest with the Department of Defense and primarily carried out by the Air Force. The military has also led social change. While African Americans were not integrated into regular Army units for the first part of our country's history, this started to evolve in World War II. General Colin Powell, who was the country's first African American Secretary of State, has become a symbol of the Army's relative openness to racial integration. He rose through the Army's ranks to become the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The current Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, which is the number 2 position in our Army, is General Lloyd Austin, who is a West Point graduate. Now, I'm going to shift gears a bit and talk about systems thinking. How do we recognize the need to adapt and recognize the interconnectedness of issues in addressing the need to change? We teach up at West Point, we look at the systems thinking approach. Now, this is just one definition of this concept, which I took from that very good resource called Wikipedia. I would ding my students for doing this. But I believe what it does is it captures the essence of the idea. Now, note that I emphasize the part about understanding how things influence one another, which I believe is what leads to a true understanding of a complex situation, to understand how issues and components are interconnected. The picture on the right just attempts to portray the use of systems thinking to understand employee relations. Very simplistic diagram about how employees relate to each other and to management is simplified here to show as a function of how they work, the organization in which they work, the work environment or climate, and employee satisfaction. To understand employee relations requires understanding all of these issues. Approaching issues from a holistic perspective using systems thinking to understand the components of an issue and how they relate is important in recognizing the need to change and adapt. You may recognize this graphic as what's called a causal loop diagram from Sturman's work. This diagram here comes from a paper that one of my cadets, Max Jenkins, recently wrote on modeling sustainable economic growth in Somalia. Somalia has been war-torn for decades and can be termed a failed state. However, there are positive signs for the future as units from African nations under the African Union cleared Mogadishu of rebel forces last summer. This may be tenuous, but it has held up so far, and there are actually inklings of hope for the future. In this paper, Max tries to show how their future relies on generating sustainable economic growth, which is inextricably linked to the ability of the government to become a functioning, positive force in the country. Starting at the top left of this diagram, as the government gains in legitimacy, cost-effective programs can grow, which can lead to reduced inflation and an increase in technology investment. Reduced inflation can lead to increased stabilization of prices, which should help generate income for the people and country. Increased investment in technology should increase the number of skilled workers and the expectations for growth in the economy. These should lead to increased rates of return for investment. A country with increasing income and rates of return on investment should lead to growth opportunities for business investment by both internal and foreign entrepreneurs. The capacity of towns and villages to govern themselves and provide services for the people is, of course, a major contributing factor for the potential of economic growth. The situation in Somalia is obviously very, very complex, but my point here is simply to show an example of using systems thinking to frame the difficult issues there in generating a sustainable country for the future. Now, there are lots of problem-solving processes out there. I'm just going to introduce you briefly to one such approach. This is called a systems decision process. And you can see this is what we teach in the Department of Systems Engineering there at West Point. And from this diagram, you can see that the SDP emphasizes an understanding of the current environment, understanding of the current system, or context of a problem, the environmental factors impacting any potential solution to the problem, and how they are interrelated as a solution is developed. The SDP has 4 phases, and that's what the bubbles represent: problem definition, solution design, decision making, and solution implementation. Now, I don't intend to walk through all these phases in detail, but rather I just want to highlight a few key characteristics of this problem-solving approach. Explicitly considering the environment surrounding an issue, and by this I mean factors such as applicable laws, cultural norms, historical perspective, and ethical considerations, in addition to many other things, helps to arrive at a solution that can eventually be implemented. Potential solutions are developed using a values-focused versus an alternative-focused approach. Now, often when I'm likely when you all are faced with a problem, no matter how small, you immediately start thinking about, okay, alternatives to fix that problem. We jump right to what we term alternative generation. What this approach says is to take a moment to stop and think. In a complex problem, the SDP approach first determines what are the characteristics that are valued in a solution by decision makers, and then designs alternative ways to meet those desired values. The alternatives are then scored based on how well they meet those stated values, and then the best solution is eventually implemented. You can see that this is much more complex than I just described. However, I believe what I've stated here captures the essence of this problem-solving approach. So how is this type of innovation present in military operations in places today like in Afghanistan? These pictures here just demonstrate a few of the technological innovations in use. At the top are pictures of soldiers with night vision devices, and the photo on the right just shows a scene at night through such a set of devices. The soldier on the bottom left is readying a small unmanned aerial vehicle to record images from the air for an area for which his unit needs information. These are small enough now to be employed by individual soldiers and to get information directly to small unit leaders instead of going through higher headquarters. Logistics have evolved so that we can deliver critical supplies to units in small mountain outposts using precise airdrop. But there is more to warfare than just technology. Today's complex operating environment requires our young leaders to negotiate with tribal elders and to train local national forces. This requires skill sets like understanding the perspectives of those with whom they interact in these countries. The experience of the last decade of war in both Iraq and Afghanistan have demonstrated that our young leaders need to employ critical thinking skills and make decisions at the lowest levels in order to succeed. The question that I and others like me ruminate on is how to prepare future leaders to employ these critical thinking skills and make good decisions that will lead to mission accomplishment and improve the organizations and the people with whom they serve. Excuse me. So now I'm going to plan to focus the remainder of my presentation on how we develop leaders of character at West Point, prepared to meet the demands of the soldiers and the nation they will serve. West Point, for background, I want you to understand, West Point is a 4-year undergraduate institution of higher learning. When a cadet successfully completes the program, he or she earns a Bachelor of Sciences degree and a commission as an officer in the United States Army. This is our mission. Note the emphasis on producing leaders of character to serve as officers in our Army. Please note the emphasis also on values in our mission statement. I'm going to walk through, this represents an overarching framework for developing leaders of character at West Point. Now, we are not just a college, and not just a military training organization. We are both, and more. We seek to develop critical thinkers who are creative problem solvers, prepared to lead in a complex world. We build leadership and teamwork skills while flaming within cadets a passion to serve others. This requires a holistic approach to development. We recognize that people come at us at different levels of readiness to develop along the dimensions we stress, so we have to tailor some of the experiences for them to the individual. We deliberately design and integrate challenging developmental experiences for cadets. Cadets gain new knowledge and capabilities to think and perform through our various developmental experiences. Development also requires time to think, time to reflect on the knowledge and experiences gained in order to understand what they have learned and how this better prepares them for the future. You know, this development does not happen overnight. People need time to grow intellectually, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Our end state is to meet the challenges faced by our graduates today and around the world. We use assessment, lots and lots of assessment processes, to provide feedback and figure out what gaps we have in their development. We purposely want our cadets, we challenge our cadets. Frankly, we want them to fail at some point while they're cadets. Many come to us as the best students, the best athletes, the social magnets in their high school, having never really experienced failing or significant challenge in their life. By design, the amount of rigor of the experiences cadets engage in at West Point almost assures that each will fail at something at one point. And it's better to fail at practice than in the game. Individual growth and learning happens by how someone responds to the adversity of failure. We provide lots of support and resources to help our cadets along this developmental journey. Faculty are not just teachers. They serve as mentors across the varied experiences in a cadet's life, like academics, sports, and social clubs, and in their military training experiences. I already went through that. Now, we purposely develop along what we call 6 dimensions of development: intellectual, military, physical, moral, ethical, the human spirit, and social. And I'm going to quickly talk about each. Although I will, because I'm the dean, I will spend more time on the intellectual part. Our curriculum is designed as a 4-year liberal arts education that results in a Bachelor of Science degree with a specific major. Cadets take a large number of required or core courses that are balanced across the humanities, social sciences, math, basic sciences, and engineering. Cadets also take one of 37 different majors that represent the spectrum of disciplines I just mentioned. However, cadets develop intellectually through many experiences outside of the classroom that bring the curriculum to life. That's the challenge in education today, is how do you bring that curriculum to life? So we do that in many ways. Cadets compete in academic competitions around the world. They do research with faculty. They perform service projects, do applied work that integrates concepts they have learned across the curriculum. These are a big part of the development of innovation and creativity in cadets. And so in those pictures, there's cadets doing research in the top left in chemistry and life sciences. The 2 bottom pictures on the bottom left and right are academic competitions. The one on the lower left is cadets competing in the cyber defense exercise. The National Security Agency for the last 11 years has sponsored a competition in which, at the different service academies, in which during a 3-day exercise, they purposely attempt to hack into our networks. And the cadets are responsible for defending the networks. And we have won 6 out of the last 10 years. The one on the lower right is cadets in Model United Nations. And those are tremendous experiences in which cadets are faced with very challenging problems, like how to fix this Boingo thing here, you know. And so they've won. We came in second place in our category over the last 2 years on the international stage. I talked about service work and international experiences. I'll talk a little more international later, but in that picture at the bottom are cadets working with a non-governmental organization called Engineers Without Borders. And they're down in Nicaragua helping work through and design drainage solutions to problems in some of the higher elevations in towns in Nicaragua. All right, not cooperating here. Technology is a wonderful thing. Oh no. There we go. I figure a systems engineer could figure this out. The military dimension emphasizes development of leadership and teamwork skills and basic military tactics and techniques. But cadets are immersed in leadership practice as they take on progressively more responsible positions of authority in leading their fellow cadets. The military training also attempts to replicate some of the current scenarios our graduates face, such as in the negotiation exercise you see in that picture in the lower left. We require all cadets to be athletes because the military by nature can be physically demanding. Cadets take a full regimen of required physical education classes such as boxing, swimming, and combatives, and all participate in one of our NCAA teams, our competitive clubs, or intramural teams. You can see the number of teams, and several of our competitive club sports have been national champs in recent years, like boxing, team handball, women's rugby, orienteering, and pistol. Moral ethical development. All cadets are expected to adhere to this honor code. Violations of this are adjudicated by other cadets, and the programs are developmental by design. We have ethics education classes and exercises that cadets engage in year-round to help build upon the foundation of values each individual brings to the academy. Now, we want and need our graduates to learn about themselves, about what makes them tick, so to speak, and to understand how to be resilient and to overcome adversity. We want them to develop a sense of service or to answer a call higher than themselves. So these pictures, what they represent in the top left, that's just a picture of cadets working at our cemetery, helping to decorate the graves of those who've gone before us. You see that picture in boxing. All cadets all the men take a boxing class, women take combatives. But that boxing class, trust me, can be a real development of how to overcome adversity, having done that myself, getting beaten up a few times. That picture in the lower left, that's actually cadets in a gas chamber where they are put into a chamber with tear gas and have to take off their masks. So they develop a confidence in their mask, but they also deal with some adversity of emergency service workers who died on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. We have cadets who volunteer each year to participate in this, and it's a bit of a journey because we have to let them volunteer, and we all go down at 04:30 on a Sunday morning to head down there. But the run route, and about 2,000 of them went this year, at about the 4,500 of them. And I had the honor of helping lead the cadets up front. But the run route traces the steps of firefighter Stephen Siller. Stephen Siller was off-duty on 9/11/2001. He was headed home. He had driven through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and was on the Brooklyn side when he heard on his radio that the first tower had been hit by a plane. Turned his truck around, tried to come back through the tunnel, but couldn't. It was all blocked up. So he pulled his truck off the side of the road, didn't let that deter him, pulled his equipment out of his truck, put it on, and he ran through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, ran through Manhattan to get to the site of the World Trade Center, and joined in fighting the fires and helping rescue people that day. And he was one of the 343 firefighters that perished that day. But this is an example of the kind of higher calling to which we want cadets to aspire. So I believe this is a great developmental experience for them. Okay, social development. I know in the Dilbert clip that I played at the start of this that it said engineers were destined for a life of social ineptitude. However, we really try to provide deliberate opportunities for cadets to recognize the world around them and to discover how they can best fit into this world. That top left picture is of cadets at Special Olympics. Each year we host a event that's the largest in the New York metropolitan area, and cadets run that event for these wonderful special athletes. We have a number of social functions that cadets get involved in, as you can see those pictures in the top right and lower left. But we also give them many, many opportunities for global engagement. That picture in the lower right is of cadets at Beijing, at Beijing Tech University, working with students there on robotics projects in the summer. We have about 140 cadets a year that go for a semester abroad to several different countries in many different universities and service academies there. We have summer internships overseas for cadets to do service work and to learn their particular discipline further. Now, we want our cadets, our graduates, to be both scholars and warriors. So I think this quote is quite appropriate for describing what we attempt to do. And yes, this is attributed to Thucydides and to some others, but I think it truly captures what we are trying to do there and what we hope our graduates will obtain. I hope through this talk I've shown you that the military is evolving. It evolves over time. It is a thinking organization that learns how to adapt. That systems thinking, which we are all attuned to, using that perspective on issues and using something like the systems decision process can lead to the development of creative solutions to issues, and that education designed across a spectrum of developmental dimensions can prepare people to ask better questions so that they understand the complexity of issues and the surrounding complex and the surrounding context. And a question I have is, how do I get that bongo thing to stop going up there? Put her on an airplane. Yeah, there we go. I've really enjoyed my time with you this morning, and I thank you for your attention. Go Army.
Take some questions now?
Sure. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Please, let's have your questions now.
Sure, and I won't say, does anybody have any questions? I was told last night that is a bad question to ask. But I'm sure I've left you wondering about some things as I went through this, or maybe I put you to sleep to get some needed sleep. I'd be happy to talk about anything else. Please. Oh gosh, the best thing about being at West Point. The best thing being at West Point is, for me and for several others, is working with those wonderful young men and women that you send to us each year. And I say that it's you that send them to us. I mean, they're a great group of committed individuals. Yeah, they're 18 to 22, 23-year-olds, so they have issues at time. They're young people, very few of them, but for the most part, they're absolutely wonderful, and they're committed to serving. I truly, and this isn't a bumper sticker, but I truly respect each cadet who has signed up, particularly in these last 10 years, knowing that the country is at war and they would likely be serving at war when they left. So for me, that's the best part, is working with that. And the faculty and staff are all pretty much committed to what we do. And that's not, every organization you go to is not necessarily all pulling together on the oars towards the same mission accomplishment. I think we are there, and that's what's special.
Tim.
Please.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for your life of service.
Oh, sure. Thanks for giving us a reason to serve.
I'm curious how new this might be and the system-mindedness, and have you had any resistance to implementing it, or if it's been around a while, are there, resistances to it, or, where do you see the conflicts?
The conflicts really reside in the more traditional engineering disciplines. So if you'll talk, and many of you all probably know this, but we teach systems engineering at the undergraduate level. It's not taught at the undergraduate level very much. Traditional engineering disciplines, mechanical, civil, electrical, so forth, don't think it's an undergraduate discipline. And so that's really part of where the conflicts arise with in education is in terms of the value of teaching systems engineering and systems thinking at an undergraduate level. Many folks believe at the undergraduate level you need to be focused on building the foundations, the building blocks for the future higher order thinking. In many ways we do, but I also think it's important to infuse in undergraduates the ability to think holistically and think across to see how things are interrelated. So that's where the biggest conflict comes from. I hope I answered your question.
Are there cultural conflicts with the military, with the government, with the United States?
I'm probably not. Probably some folks like Steve are in a better position to answer that honestly. And I'm not picking on you, Steve, and don't intend you to answer this. But I think the conflicts again arise in that it can be squishy. And people don't necessarily see connections between things, don't see the interaction effects. So if you think of statistics and what are the interaction effects between variables, people don't necessarily understand interaction effects. And that's part of what I was trying to get across, is that the interaction effects can dictate how well your solution does in fixing a problem, okay? And so that's probably that's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but that's probably the best I can give you right now. Sorry. Please.
Yes. Hi, my name is Steve Brandt, and my question is sort of on the shoulders of that. You develop people in such a brilliant and a holistic way, and in our larger culture today, I don't think we have that kind of holistic and a well-developed sense of ourselves as a nation. And I think you and who you train have a kind of a leadership example that you can offer. And I don't know what the right way that is, or if you ever think about how, when you interact with the Special Olympics, just how you interact with the larger society, how you can use that to give us hope. Because in the larger society, as I view it, with the left versus right, and we're not like one country anymore. It seems like we're awfully divided. And I just wonder if you think about how you can help give us sort of, it's almost like a systems thing, but you're showing us an alternative design where people know how to work together instead of work divided. Do you see that sort of larger role when you're not actually engaged in combat?
A couple of things. One, I agree wholeheartedly with the divisiveness right now, and unfortunately I think this is a political statement, but I think the divisiveness, we've allowed the divisiveness to come through the media with the talking heads that we go left and right. I'm sorry, that's a political statement, but I think a couple of things. One, I will tell you that we at West Point, we stay involved with higher education, get involved with different organizations. Oh, God bless you. Thank you, Perry. You didn't have to do that. I could have walked over there, but thank you very much. That was kind of him. In higher education, we get involved with many different higher education organizations. So we've had a couple of them come to us recently, liberal arts education organizations of liberal arts institutions, organizations that kind of of many different colleges and universities, and asked us to be part of those organizations to try and infuse the what I'll call the holistic development process. So at the education level, higher education level, we are engaged in that way in trying to get the discussion and this development framework built into higher education. It actually is. Several colleges and universities do this to an extent. Not the military part, but certainly other components. Now, how do we deal with it as the Army, as the military on the outside? We have had a number of initiatives to help, again, involve with education, because I truly think the way to get at some of what you're talking about is through education, not necessarily at the college level. That may be too late at the undergraduate level, but be involved at the K-12 and certainly at the high school level. So we send out teams of faculty and cadets to go do what we call STEM education initiatives. It's a drop in a bucket to what the country needs, but it's one way to infuse it. And then that STEM education, those initiatives, those programs, we don't just teach about STEM. We bring in some of the other concepts we talked about here. And we invite young people from both middle school and high school level to West Point during the summer to go through some programs. Other colleges and universities do similar things. But the Army writ large has taken on some efforts to work STEM at the end, betterment of education, public school education, through enhancing and putting more money into junior ROTC programs in public schools. Again, that is a way that we're involved in it, but and I feel most comfortable talking about our efforts within the realm of education, because I believe that that's where the effort needs to be to make sure that we have a functioning society in the future, so to speak.
I'm going to ask you a personal question. You talked about coming from an engineering background, studying engineering. What are some of the skills that helped you transition into a leader coming from an engineering background? And what are some of the skills that you had to develop that you did not learn as an engineer to become a leader?
So the first part you said was what skills that I learned as an engineer helped me to develop into a leader? Is that what you? Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I think one of the things being an engineer helps you do is just, it infuses in you a basic problem-solving approach and how to understand issues. Not necessarily, we didn't have systems engineering back at West Point in my day when I went through, but I think it infuses in you an ability to think critically and develop solutions, potential alternative solution problems. I think that helped me as an engineer because I think that's important to being a leader, is having an understanding of problem-solving approach. What helped me, not so much as an engineer, but going through West Point, was we have, because of our varied curriculum is broad, and we were required to take many, many courses in the humanities and social sciences, in addition to the hardcore math, science, and engineering. So that prepared me well, I think, for having a broad perspective as I went out. The other piece as an engineer is just the field experience you get as an engineer. I think, going into, I grew up as a civil engineer in the Army, and so my first jobs were out on the project site doing construction, having to lead many soldiers and equipment in accomplishing some mission, building some projects. And so I think that is the field experience that an engineer gets of having to make something happen, develop a product, whether it's a product, a project, a building. Having to do that at a young age is very, very important. And it's important to give our young engineers that perspective, because in that, even if you're a construction manager, or even if you're one technical part of a project, you will see the bigger picture of how to put the project management experiences, so to speak. Now, as far as the deanship, so to speak, I would tell you that my MBA helped me a lot, because when I went to the Fuqua School of Business, they had a strong emphasis on global perspective. This was the early 90s, 91 and 92, And it was great. I got to say, it was great being at Duke that period of time, because those are the 2 years that they won a national championship in basketball back to back. I'm a big Mike Krzyzewski fan, so I got to tell you, West Point grad, 1969. Anyway, what I thought was important about that, though, was a lot of their coursework and experiences they gave you were within a global arena, global perspective. And that was something, although I had been stationed in Europe for 3 years, I don't think I really got that global perspective that was brought. And some of the things we discussed in the MBA program, I think helped me to be able to reach across programs now, because now, and then I went on and like I said, kept in kind of in engineering and in education. But that perspective, I think, helped me now in terms of being able to relate to the humanities and social sciences disciplines that, which are wonderful up there, and that I have to provide some oversight to. You're welcome.
Thank you again for your service. My question is that in teaching, my name is Ron Schultz, and the notion of teaching systems thinking and the kind of novel emergence that can come out of those interactions. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the whole notion of leadership and collaboration, and how you capture what emerges out of the collaborative process and bring that into the process where it's a very hierarchical leadership process as well.
I could talk about that, if I may, through our education process. We actually, in our required courses in leadership, a big part of that is negotiation. And so cadets get a pretty good exposure to negotiation. We also have cadets and faculty members that run negotiations training for military units. They will go out and go out to different military units before they deploy to now Afghanistan, and run them through some programs on how to negotiate, particularly, as I mentioned before, they've got to negotiate with tribal elders and town leaders and so on and so forth. So capturing that, I think you may be getting a different area. I'm looking at the collaboration at the individual level or in a group level, not so much collaboration on a broad network. I'm speaking specifically to collaboration at the lower level between individuals.
The emergence that comes out of the collaborations within those negotiations, so they're collaborative,
right, as opposed to.
Oh,
yes. Okay, I see. Kind of the win-win, so to speak, and be collaborative and rather than directive in those. We do take them through. We take cadets through these negotiation experiences and counseling experiences, emphasizing very heavily how to put people in a win-win scenario, so to speak, and not so much the directive type of leadership. The other way we do it is through, I mentioned that the cadets run the chain of command there. The cadets are in charge of other cadets throughout the 4 years, and it's a increasing developmental experience. They start out the first year, they're a member of squad. They learn how to be a good follower. And that's, frankly, that's not necessarily, people don't necessarily learn that all the time. How do you follow? Sometimes you got to shut up and follow, But that's an important part to learn how to lead is to become you have to be a good follower, I think, to be a good leader. And then they progressively go on to higher and higher positions of authority throughout their 4-year experience. And throughout that process, they're required to counsel those under their charge and to set up experiences and to go through counseling experiences where they create, so to speak, win-win type of situation. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but okay. Sure, please.
Hi. My name is Glenn Halfshold, and I just want to make first a little comment on something that Steve Millay mentioned, that if we at Rocketdyne don't do our job and the satellite doesn't get there, that people may not come home. I just wanted to point out that the people who don't come home are more than likely going to be the boots on the ground, which are the very people that Tim Trainor is talking about. So it's a very personal issue. But I wondered if for this audience, if you couldn't describe the process you use to encourage creativity and innovativeness in the cadets, teaching them problem solving in sort of group environments?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Glenn. That's I appreciate that question. First of all, the problem solving. All cadets will have to take engineering, so they will go through problem solving approaches. But really, at the higher level, in terms of creativity and innovation, all cadets in their senior year have to do some sort of senior design project. Not necessarily just the engineers, but also cadets in the humanities have to do applied work, and typically that applied work is almost always with real-world clients. So we will have our cadets and the faculty reach out to different Army and DoD organizations, and even contracting organizations who are working for the Department of Defense, and ask them for relevant problems and issues they're dealing with right now. And then we have the cadets work typically collaboratively in a team, small teams, 4 to 5 cadets work together in designing, thinking through, defining the problem, thinking through solutions, developing alternative solutions, and presenting those solutions to this client from outside West Point. And much of their grade is based on how well they met the needs or the values of that client. And so that is something we have infused into the curriculum over this last decade, because we realized the need for doing that application, but not necessarily application on standard cases that have been done in the past. It's on real world, ill-defined or undefined problems that cadets have to develop a solution to. And in that process, they're collaborating, they're going back and forth with the organization that's going to own that solution, so they understand the issues. So they get to learn not just about how the engineering or the humanities aspect of it. They have to learn about how to deal with the client. And so the end state is taking some sort of undefined problem, developing a solution that meets the needs of that organization. And I think that is a big way in which we infuse creativity and innovation into the cadet's life. So I hope that answers your question, Glenn. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I thank you for your time, and I really enjoy this.